we are going to keep this story in the news because it is so critical. It's so common sense. It is insane that the state of Washington is putting drug addicts ahead of the safety of babies and children. But that's what's happening. So we've done a few stories now on the decision from the state of Washington to defund and then pull the contract of the Pediatric Interim Care Center. This is a facility in Kent that's been around for decades that takes care of babies who are born drug addicted. And it is a really, it's just such a wonderful facility, and they make it feel like a home. So it's not like these babies are in this chaotic hospital setting. They each have their own little rooms, and they have somebody there to take care of them and to cradle them and to, just make sure that they feel loved and safe while they're getting the treatment they need. So it's just crazy at a time when we've seen the numbers from DCYF. The numbers of babies being born into addiction is up. The numbers of children under the care of the state of Washington who die after exposure with drugs or who almost die after exposure with drugs, way up, way up. This is shaping up to be a very sad year on that front. And then Democrats turn around. Bob Ferguson vetoes $100,000, a measly $100,000 in funding to this facility. And then the Department of Children, Youth and Families pulls the contract. So on Sunday's show, we had Representative Michelle Caldeira on 2 Sundays ago, I think it was. We had a guest this Sunday talk about it as well, about they're trying to get to the bottom of why the state of Washington did this. Why did Democrats want to defund this thing? So we've heard a lot from Republicans, haven't heard a lot from Democrats, except for State Representative Mari Levit, who, as we discussed on the show, she went on social media, tagged Bob Ferguson, said she was calling on him to pause the decision to end the PIC contract and extend it a year to spend the time with intention to assess the system need, options available, and how best to move forward, nothing to lose, and only babies to care for to survive and thrive. So she became the first elected Democrat in Olympia to say, hey, we need to keep PIC open, at least for now, while we give this a thorough review. And not just close this facility at a time of great need that's been operating for years and years and years. So Representative Mari Levit, again, a Democrat, was nice enough to join us today to talk about what the hell is going on. Representative, welcome back to Undivided.
Thanks, Brandi, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you speaking up about PIC, and, it should be a political, nonpartisan issue. Have you been able to ascertain any further details about why they decided to not only defund it, but pull the license?
Yeah, I have. And I had conversations with DCYF before I went on the tour. So I could understand from their perspective what had happened and why, and also to help me be informed to ask questions that I may have while I'm on the tour. And so they provided me some information and I asked those questions. But, from their perspective, what I gather is they view PIC as using a model that was developed in the 1990s and no longer is as relevant or considered a best practice compared to the kinds of services that children can get in different care models. They also, talked about the fact that PIC wasn't asking for Medicaid dollars, so we were leaving federal dollars on the table. And I understand. We never want to leave federal dollars on the table. We always want to get the federal dollars first if we can as a state. But I'm not sure that argument matters because of the private funding that PIC receives. So it's not as if they're solely, relying on public dollars to operate. And then they also just talked about the fact that fewer babies were coming to the facility and were getting referred. And so it may not be as cost efficient because the nature of the contract is 12 months. Sorry, my cat is...
Hey, we always love a good cat debut.
Yes. So because of the nature of the contract, it was 12 months divided, monthly in terms of the revenue that they were receiving, PIC was receiving. And so perhaps not as cost effective. Again, I'm not so sure that argument holds water, but that's the rationale. And the veto came about because DCYF recommended it, knowing that the contract was significantly less. It had gone from about 1.4, 1.5 over a 2-year period down to 100,000. And so DCYF was the one, or the entity rather, that recommended the veto because I had a meeting with the governor's office as well to understand from their perspective what happened.
Yeah, and I should correct myself because I said at the beginning the state pulled their license, but they still have a license. They just don't have a contract, so they're not able to get infants. Yeah, a lot of
Correct.
that I tend to agree with you. You know, the budgetary argument doesn't hold any water for me, and so I wish it had never been brought up by anyone. You know, this idea of the outdated model, I've heard some rumors, and maybe it's just rumors, that they basically don't think that the woman who runs PIC is deferential enough to the mothers in addiction. I mean, do you think by touring it and what you know about PIC that this is a place that has an outdated model or is not a good place for these babies to go?
Yeah, no, quite the contrary. I mean, I do, I think they're DC from DCYF's perspective, when they talk about the model, it's eat, sleep, and console. And for my touring pick, and I'm really so grateful that my colleagues did a all call an invitation to visit because I've been wanting to for a little bit. And so what I saw was a place that was low stimulation environment, which I think these children really, really need, these little sweet babies. I saw a place that was clean, that was quiet, that was professional, that had medical grade equipment that I would think you would need. And so and they would say, the ladies who run PIC and as well as the board chair, who also toured with us, that they do provide an eat, sleep, console model. While it may not be precisely as defined by DCYF or perhaps the best practice model that is being proclaimed to be the ideal way for these babies to be treated. It certainly, I think, qualifies as an eat, sleep, console model in the relevancy of taking care of these babies as they need. So again, I think that argument it doesn't fly. The other thing that DCYF I think has shared concerns about is parental access to the babies. And so there is a difference. I mean, hospitals, I think, have a parent has more access. And the argument that DCYF has made is that these families can't sleep in. So they don't have the 24/7 access that perhaps you might have somewhere else. And then also that they've requested PIC to provide those kinds of avenues and access for parents. And while PIC has increased their access, they don't have a sleep-in model. But again, PIC has paid for hotel vouchers for nearby hotels for these parents so that they can come anytime within a period of hours, within daytime hours. And again, I think that was a concern of DCYF is access. But I just don't think that necessarily holds water as well. While I understand that's the ideal, we want our families to interact with these babies as much as possible. Not all families or guardians are able to do that. And so allow them to continue to serve the families who aren't equipped to be able to take care of these babies in the way that they really need it.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of doing the reporter's job by saying, here's what I'm being told, here's why it doesn't hold water. And I tend to agree with you. I mean, every kind of excuse that's been put forth, like the eat, sleep, console, the director of PIC has trained other people in that method. And so, as you pointed out, it's a method that they use there, maybe not to the letter of what the state would want. So I guess, what does your gut tell you, Representative, is at the center of this decision, especially at a time when there are more babies in need? There are more babies being born addicted.
Yeah, I think my gut says we need to keep the contract. That's what my gut says. I think my professional knowledge based on the conversations that I've had is I don't think that we know as a state what the needs are. I don't think we've assessed how many beds are available and where these beds are, and for our foster families, who are they equipped to take care of these babies in the way that they need it. I don't think we have answers to that, Brandi, and that's been my concern. And I don't think we know what's the cost differential between a baby being treated at PIC, which again has public-private partnership, which are always the best models in my view, to have a little bit of both. And I don't think that we know that answer. And, I have asked for that information. I haven't received it yet. I've asked the governor's office for that information. I don't think they know it. I have another meeting this afternoon with DCYF and the secretary, along with another legislative colleague of mine, and another meeting with the governor's office this Friday. It'll be the second meeting. And so my gut says I think they're digging in and moving on. And I think that's truly unfortunate. I hope that the continued conversations and the more that folks are, legislative colleagues are inquiring, I hope that resonates with folks, but I just don't think it's the right time. If at the end of the year, what I've called for is that we unsever the contract, allow PIC to continue, and at the end of a year, if we assess that their model is perhaps not the best model and there are better things out there and enough beds, great. But we don't know that. And I don't think anybody does in good faith to be able to say that.
Yeah, and here's the maybe difficult question politically, although I don't think you've shied away from, I mean, you're on our show, right? I'm sure that your fellow Democratic colleagues will love that. Do you trust DCYF to be making decisions with the best interests of these vulnerable kids in mind?
I think there are staff at DCYF who do have the best interest of children at mind. I do. We have a new secretary. I called on the removal of the last secretary. I made that public, and that was mainly related to juvenile justice issues and Green Hill. But I do trust that this new secretary and Secretary Sin wants to do the right thing, and ensuring that she's surrounding herself with folks who aren't, I call it bureaucratic lens. You get entrenched as employees and think you know best, and hubris can get in the way of serving the public in the way that they deserve. And so I'm hoping that that is not the case in this venture for PIC, that they step back and realize perhaps we don't have all the answers, perhaps we aren't making the right decision, and do some reflection to recognize that we need this facility, because to my knowledge, we don't have a lot of facilities like PIC who can give the most incredible intensive care that these babies need. And I had a constituent with a baby who was cared for in PIC, and he told me, Mari, this was a low stimulation barrier for these babies who are going through hell, quote, going through hell, because of how they were born, and it's a form of torture for them not to have the care in the way in which they need it, and to close down PIC, in his view, is also a mistake. And so, I trust my constituent who cared for a baby that was after PIC, and so I trust his information as well. And so I do think DCYF wants to do the right thing, but I think that there are some folks who are embedded and have wanted to make this decision, I suspect, for a while, and perhaps saw an opportunity to do so and move on. And I think it was short-sighted, and I think it's a mistake. And I shared that I thought it was a mistake to the governor's office as well, and we'll continue to say that.
Yeah, and I know, and maybe it's a better way to ask the question. I mean, I know you've been critical of some aspects or results, I guess, of the Keeping Families Together Act. We've seen the latest numbers from DCYF that this year we could have maybe more than 3 times the amount of children under the care or watchful eye of the state that could die or have near-death experiences from some sort of interaction with drugs in the home, which is just awful. It's not I think the outcome anyone wanted when it came to the Keeping Families Together Act. So I guess, do you think DCYF is prioritizing drug-addicted parents over the well-being of children?
That's a good question. I think they're prioritizing finding ways to keep families together in all ways that they can. But I think our current laws, I introduced House Bill 1159, which is endangerment, opiates, endangerment of a crime, to enhance that. The current statute, which currently is a misdemeanor. Methamphetamine is a felony, and it's on the books, but we want to expand that. And part of the reason for expanding that is, if it's a felony, it allows courts to get parents into treatment, and it allows no contact orders, which the courts currently don't have, until such time that a parent gets the treatment that we know and we want them to receive, and to keep those children safe. There's a baby who was killed in Pierce County not that long ago, and speaking to the prosecutor, and she talked about how the investigator, this little sippy cup, was just covered. It was so contaminated in a way that they hadn't seen since the meth days. And so, you bring this up, and I've raised it as well. And what DCYF points out is because I've said, look, our rates are increasing of babies being either born addicted or being exposed to drugs that will kill them. I mean, babies taking fentanyl is a lot different than an adult, and even adults die pretty quickly with the right, with the right amount. And so, what they say is that you can't conflate the two. They're two distinct issues, and PIC does not take care of those babies who are older, who have been impacted. PIC takes care of tiny little babies coming out of the hospital, being born addicted, and going through withdrawals. So they're two distinct, very different issues. And so, fair point.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of
Yes,
disagree, but go ahead.
yeah, I mean, but fair point that wouldn't be taking care of those children, but we still have an obligation to take care of those children. And for me, if you have fentanyl lying around your house, and that's why I introduced House Bill 1159, working with the prosecutors, to me, it's the same thing as having a loaded gun on a coffee table. I mean, if you're not going to leave a loaded gun lying around for a 4-year-old to pick up and shoot a sister, right? Because they're going to play with whatever's around them. And to me, leaving fentanyl on a table or in your house when you have children in the vicinity, children pick up things and they put it in their mouth. 12-year-olds pick up things and put it in their mouth. And so there is a liability and an obligation of a parent or a guardian or someone who is living in that home to keep those children safe, and they're not doing that. And so that's why I think we need to change that law. And I'm hoping in the conversation today that we can talk about those things as well, as what do we need to change in our current law to allow our social workers to identify in advance before a child dies. And I just don't think we're doing enough, and those numbers are alarming to me as well.
Yeah, and I will ask you about that next. But then, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you believe the Keeping Families Together Act is directly responsible, at least in part, for the rise in deaths of children under the care of DCYF?
I don't know. I mean, I know, I understand your question, and I'm not avoiding the question. I just don't know. I need to see the stats of the how often DCYF was involved in those cases or not involved, and what determinations were made to be able to really correlate the two together. I do think we need to fix the Keeping Families Together Act and adjust for the increase and rise in the deaths that we're seeing, or near deaths, near fatalities. I mean, we revived a lot of kids with Narcan, thank goodness, including, one in Pierce County who was a 12-year-old. But again, having access to that and increasing access, we shouldn't be known as the second state in the union of deaths from fentanyl and opiate-related things, and that's not how Washington State wants to be known, and that's how we are, and the deaths in Pierce County are no different, and it's very concerning. And so we need to fix something about it, and we need to listen to our social workers who are crying out for a change, and what legislatively that change is yet will be determined, and how that correlates, I don't know, but I'm certainly asking those questions to find out, because if we're contributing to these deaths, then we're culpable as state elected officials, and I don't want to be culpable for a baby's death in my county.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I don't think anybody wants to be culpable, and it's kind of crazy to me that we're even having the conversation about, like, who gets more deference, a parent who's going through addiction, or a baby or a toddler who can't stand up for themselves. It's like, well, obviously, let's make sure the baby or the child is safe, and we want to help both, but it's so weird to me, this push and pull of, like, well, I don't know if you ever saw the interview with Representative Roger Goodman, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee. He did an interview with King 5 News where he basically said, it was about I don't know if it's directly the bill that you introduced, it might have been, but about, we don't want to hold parents accountable for, if their child gets in contact with drugs, because we don't want to punish their addiction. That was stunning to me. I mean, that's a stunning thing. How do you, I guess, when you're saying the Keeping Families Together Act needs to be fixed, is there an appetite based on comments like that among your fellow Democrats to fix it?
Yeah, I hope there is. I mean, I respectfully disagree with my good chair of that committee in on this issue. I think that we have a responsibility to these children, and we want parents to get treatment. And that's why 1159 increases it to a felony, because it allows that no contact order to not allow the parents to have access to that child until such time that they get treatment, and it can order treatment. And so I think that we have to change the laws, and we have to recognize that we are placing these children in danger, and we can't continue to do that. And so I think while I understand that, a parent losing a child is the most unimaginable, horrific thing, in particular if you caused it. I mean, the grief and guilt, I would imagine, would be tremendous. And we can't allow it to occur. And that's the problem. I mean, I understand that argument. I don't understand that argument that we can't hold families accountable. And in fact, we just had two parents charged in Pierce County because of their child's death. Yeah. But the difference is when I asked the prosecutors, well, you can already charge. I saw the Pierce County prosecutor not that long ago, and I said, I need talking points. I need to understand if you can already charge and you're charging the parents, why do we need to change the law? If you can do it, you can do it. And she said it's because it's a misdemeanor. There's not a lot of accountability. It's felony allows the no contact order, and it allows the courts to get those families for near deaths and deaths into treatments. And we can't do that without changing the law. So in my view, if we care about our babies and our children, and we want people to get in treatment, which we all do. I mean, all of us, I think the majority of Washingtonians know someone, if they don't have someone in their family who has been addicted in some form, and myself included. And so not that I was addicted, but certainly have family members who have been. It's tremendous, the journey that they need to go through, but they also can't put children in danger, and that's what we're allowing them to do.
Yeah, and as we've said on this show, you can't keep families together if somebody's dead. That is definitely not keeping families together. Yeah. I want to ask you really quickly about a story that's been in the news for a few days. This working group to consider a plan for a safe drug supply. And I think it goes hand in hand with, this direction we're going in this state to sort of normalize substance abuse. So my understanding of it, please correct me if I'm off base on any of it. The working group was created by a bill that was passed by the legislature in 2021 to look into this idea of a safe supply. I think you voted for the overarching bill, which had to do with kind of addressing the decision from the Blake decision and the drug possession statute change. Did you know at the time? I mean, were you aware that this working group was considering a plan to literally have the state become drug dealers?
Oh goodness, no. The 2021 bill was the Blake decision. That was bipartisan vote. We needed to do something because it had I wouldn't say decriminalized, but it lowered the threshold, and so we needed to get back to the threshold of what it should be as a gross misdemeanor. But I had no concept of a working group that was recommended. It's funny you should ask. I just got appointed to the Substance Use Advisory Committee. So it's called SURSAC. And I attended my first meeting. I just got appointed last week and just attended my first meeting a couple days ago. And the chair of the committee started off because there were several new members, including 3 new legislators, myself included, talking and I would say distancing themselves from this work group. The chair talked about the fact that, we just want you to know that there's misinformation in the news. You may have questions about this. This is not a work group associated with our committee. It is a work group that we recommended a work group study the issue, and that's it. That's our exact association with it. And so I pressed a little bit. I'm like, well, what's true and what's not, and how is it aligned, and do we have jurisdiction over the committee that they recommend to us? Do they recommend to the healthcare authority? Somebody does the contract, therefore somebody has to manage the contract.
Right.
I didn't get quite my answers that I was hoping to get clarity.
Yeah.
But again, I'm a new member, and it's the first introduction to having that conversation, and realized that wasn't the purpose of the meeting. He was just trying to make a point, like, we're not a part of it. We're not a part of it, is kind of what I heard him say.
Well, how can he say they're not a part of it if they recommended that there be a working group to look at safe supply?
Well, they recommended the work group, I think, and that's it, and that's disbanded, yeah. So I've asked for a separate meeting to understand the alignment and what the work group, who are they reporting to, who are they making the recommendations to? Is it state? Is it county? Is it local communities that are making those decisions, or local hospitals? I don't know. I don't know. And so yeah. I need to know in order to understand the correlation to the work group, or to the committee rather, that I just got appointed to. And so I invited my new legislator colleagues who are just newly appointed to join me in that meeting to help us understand exactly how they're aligned, and then also what is being done with those work group recommendations, because I think some of them certainly caused me pause, but I haven't read them all in detail. But for now, I just want to know how it's associated with the committee and associated with the state agency and what they're going to do about it.
Right. I mean, I'm looking at a document.
What they're going to do with the recommendations, not what they're going to do about it. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at a document of the recommendations that has Washington State Healthcare Authority on the top of it in the letterhead. So if they created or called for it, they called for it for a reason. They wanted to look into the issue and now want to distance themselves from it. It's kind of weird to me. And I mean, all of the recommendations in it are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I mean, the fact that we would in any way supply drugs to people who are in addiction is nuts. In any form or fashion, is that something that you would support, Representative?
And generally, no. I don't think that helps. I mean, certainly, I have supported methadone clinics. Our local health department had a methadone clinic where people can get treatment. I mean, that's a form of weaning oneself off, but that's regulated through the health department and others that we've had in Pierce County for a while that has been successful. But I don't support, supplies being given, and certainly not regulated controlled substances being given to individuals, even if they are in safe places, to be able to continue to use. I don't think that's the best model in any research that I've seen that suggests that they eventually wean off and become successful and treated with recovery. I look forward to looking at those recommendations, but certainly can't imagine a world in which I would support those.
I would take those recommendations, I would crumple them up, and I would just throw them in the trash. I mean, it's wild stuff. There's a sentence in here where they're talking about, let's do this and then find alternative lawful income sources for people trapped in the illicit distribution economy. They're talking about drug dealers. Like, if we step in as the drug dealers, let's find alternative lawful income sources for the drug dealers we put out of work. It's wild stuff. Well, Representative...
That's not something I would support in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I do. Well, to be clear, I do support drug dealers finding other jobs, lawful jobs that aren't
but
dealing
I'm
drugs.
not state subsidized. Correct.
Not state subsidized. Yes. Oh, what a crazy world we're in. Well, Representative, I appreciate your time. Thank you for advocating for not only PIC, but also just children. Like, it's crazy to me that there's so few who are being vocal about this real problem that we have with substance abuse and these innocent kids. And so I just can't thank you enough for being a strong advocate and trying to fix some of the faults in the laws that are on the book. So please keep us updated on the PIC front.
I will.
And we'll see what happens there.
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
So that is State Representative Mari Levit, a Democrat who wants to figure out, like Republicans do, what the heck is happening with the situation with his facility and the money being taken away and the contract being taken away. It's all screams of politics and ideology and this agenda of giving deference to drug-addicted parents and doing things that don't protect children, which is just wild to me. So I'm glad there's at least we got one Democrat in Olympia who's willing to say that out loud and say, hey, we need to do better for these kids. And why would we just like that defund this facility at a time of record need? Makes no sense. We're not letting the story go. We're talking about little babies here, born drug addicted. It should be non-controversial, non-political. So we're not going to let the story go until they at least give the contract back to PIC and then do some actual work and tell us the real reason. That's the other issue here is they came out, oh, it's the budget. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. Oh, it's that. When you have to change your story so much, it's clear you're lying. So if you gave us a reason and stuck to it, then at least we'd have a starting point to work with to understand what happened. But you're not willing to tell the truth, which makes all of us very suspicious. So wild. I appreciate Mari Levit's time.